A mediator of mine who used to look after me as a kid was working at the hospital some time ago. I can't exactly remember, but I think it was around 2014 when when she had this encounter. She was still in somewhat of a university program, with her working at the hospital as a nurse. She had been studying to become a nurse, and she had been taking some courses involving in the medical field. However, one of these nights in the hospital was something unexplainable, but also more confusing than ever. Now, of course, there was this one incident that took place at the hospital. For for my mediator's privacy, I am going to call her by the name of Nicole. Nicole was working at the hospital one night as she was called in due to the fact that apparently another nurse was unable to attend to her shift, thus having Nicole to work on her day off. It was overtime pay at the end of the week, so it didn't really bother her much. She was mainly doing the night shift, making sure patients were okay and that if they needed something, she would get it for them. However, though, one of the hospital rooms had a patient who unfortunately passed away, needed to be cleaned, so of course, she was going in that room to do some cleaning. While she was cleaning the hospital room, she ended up hearing what sounded like a rocking chair. She ended up looking up to thinking that there could have been maybe another nurse or possibly someone in the room, but she couldn't find anyone in the room with her. However, she was really confused as to who it was, so she ended up going out of the hospital room to have a look around. When she looked around, she realized that it came from outside of the hospital room. She ended up seeing that there were some rooms down the hallway when she ended up hearing what sounded like the chair rocking. They didn't have any rocking chairs in any of the rooms, so it was confusing as to who or what was making the rocking noises. The few nurses that were on duty said they couldn't hear anything, and they didn't even hear a rocking chair, to which it was confusing to Nicole. Of course, Nicole continued to clean up the room when she ended up hearing what seemed like a laugh of a woman. Now, the woman's laugh sounded like she was in her 30s or early 40s, but she couldn't see anybody in the room. Even with all the lights on, she couldn't see anybody in the room. Honestly, she was more confused as to if this was some sort of prank or not, but she couldn't find anyone in that room. She even got security to secure the room to be on the safe side in case if there was really someone in there, but they couldn't find anyone. To this day, Nicole still wonders if this was just some sort of prank or if it was something paranormal. Some nurses claim that it could have been maybe just someone really insane, or maybe they were just doing the night shift so much they don't get enough sleep. Nicole still to this day even wonders if it was paranormal, but judging by after this story, she really doesn't even know what to believe in. For some context, this actually happened to my granddad back in 2016. This was around the time before he died, which was at least a couple of days before he died. My mom was with him pretty much most of the night, but this was around the time after she left to go home. It was around the middle of the night, probably around maybe 3 in the morning, when my grandfather woke up. For some reason, he woke up and he couldn't even remember exactly why he woke up. He looked around the room thinking that maybe a nurse woke him up, but that didn't seem to be the case. Of course, this was around the time when he was able to still walk okay, but of course, he asked a nurse for assistance to get to the bathroom. Of course, after the assistance was done by the nurse, he decided to go for a walk around the hallway, which of course the nurse said that he could as long as he was careful. Of course, she stayed by him just to be on the safe side in case if he happened to have fallen or something else happened. My granddad was wandering the halls with the nurse beside him when he ended up looking over to see that there was someone in the middle of the hallway. Of course, at first he thought that it could have been a visitor, but since visiting hours were over, it honestly was raising red flags that there was a person in the hallway. The nurse apparently walked up to the man and appeared to be a man maybe in his 40s, maybe early 50s, and he said, "I'm just looking for my kid." That was all he said. He ended up saying, I'm looking for my daughter or something like that, but the nurse didn't really buy his story one bit. Of course, he had asked if she could take him to see his daughter, and even gave him the name, but there was no name by that what he gave. My granddad just stood there as he watched, and honestly, he didn't even know if this man was dangerous or not. All he could do was just stare as this man started asking the nurse some weird questions. Apparently, it wasn't until this woman finally said no and said that she would get security if he didn't leave. This was the most disturbing part because the man said, "You made the right decision." He walks out of the hospital, and that was when the nurse got the security and ended up giving them the brief description as to who this man was. Honestly, the police couldn't find him, as they even tried everything they could to see if they could find him in the hospital or around the area, but they couldn't even find him. My granddad wasn't sure if he was dangerous or not, but the nurse said that he most likely was dangerous, as when he turned around, she saw he had a large knife. Honestly, it freaked her out more, knowing that whoever was in that hospital was definitely a man, and he definitely probably had plans to kill someone or do God knows what. It's still frightening to my granddad to this day, but even though he's dead now, he died sometime before Valentine's Day. He would never forget who this man was, but of course, there was even no traces, and that man was never seen again. I don't even know if he's still out there hurting people or not, but I like to think that he's locked up and is behind bars. I still don't even know what to even think about who he was, but nobody really knows who he is. Even if he did have a kid with him, why would he come here in the hospital when visiting hours were up? That was the most questionable thing that I could ever think of. So this happened just recently, back in October of 2023. This was taking place before before my nana died. She was my mom from my mom's side. Of course, this was around the time when she was in the hospital. Of course, I can't even remember how long ago it was, but it was around the time when my mom was in the hospital herself due to an injury. However, my nana, though, she was sick and she had cancer. She was up in the middle of the night and she happened to be walking around the halls. Of course, she ended up looking over to see that there was this woman staring at her. Honestly, she couldn't even remember who this woman was, but she appeared to be wearing a hospital gown, assuming that she was a woman working at the hospital. Of course, my nana turned around to see a nurse asking my nana if she was okay, and when my nana looked, the woman was gone. There were even no trace as to who this woman was or if she was even real. Even my nana tried to express it, but however, though, the nurses couldn't identify the person, even though it could have might well be paranormal, but I don't even really know for sure. How I managed to know about the story of what happened with my nana is she told one of my uncles about it before she passed. Of course, I think what she experienced that day was completely paranormal, but she don't really know what to really believe. This took place in the winter, about maybe 7 or 6 years ago. This actually happened to one of my friends. Of course, they were visiting their mom in the hospital since she had some sort of transplant, organ transplant. So, of course, she was visiting her mom at the hospital. Now, since this was winter about maybe 8 or 7 years ago, she doesn't really remember too much about it, but I'll explain the details of what she gave. Now, my friend at the time name was Danielle or Danny. Danny, which we'll call her by, really enjoyed driving at night, but however, she had a bad experience with one boy who almost drove into a ditch at the time. However, this was definitely an experience that she never forget while she was in the hospital. She was in the hospital driveway parking lot at night, and she was walking when all of a sudden she looked over to see that there wasn't a figure. It appeared to be a man, maybe in his early 30s, and he was somewhat following her. She wasn't so sure why he was following her, but for some reason, he was giving really off bad vibes, so she tried to ignore him as she walked down. While she was walking, this man kept up walking close to her, only about a few feet, when she finally had enough. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this man ends up trying to grab her when she was just reaching for the car keys and try to pull her away with a knife. Danny eventually got her pepper spray and sprayed the man in the eyes, causing him to let her go. That was when she got into her car, and she drove so far away out of the hospital parking lot, she went to the police station. Once she got to the police station, she gave out a description as to who the man was and ended up explaining me what he had tried to do to her. Apparently this man was nowhere to be seen when the cops patrolled the area near the hospital after being questioned for a while as to what he looked like, what he tried to do, and etc. Of course, Danielle stopped going to the hospital late at night because of this, and it's due to her paranoia, thinking that man would return and try to come back for her. After her mom was shortly released from the hospital, there unfortunately was no trace of that man anywhere. She didn't even get an update on the man, if he was ever caught or not. She liked to think that he might have got away somewhere else, but she also feared what he was planning on doing to another city or something. But she also wondered if that man was already caught and in jail. She can only hope that he is rotting in jail, but she doesn't really know. All she really knows is that the man was nowhere to be found, and she was grateful that he never returned again. She doesn't even know what this man would have done to her if she didn't even have her pepper spray with her. God only knows what would have happened to her that winter night, and she probably would not have come home.